welcome to Taking It to the Streets. I'm your host, Andy Goldman from sunny St. Pete, Florida. This is the show where we take it to the streets, knowing if we don't, the streets will take it to us. Welcome to Taking It to the Streets. It's Andy Goldman, and here we are again going into what will be surely an unbelievable U.S. Open at Oakmont. Before we begin, this program is brought to you in part by Wrightwood Medical, www.wrightwoodmedical.com. That's with a W. You can reach them at 773-848-7100, or again, www.wrightwoodmedical.com. They're your leader in refurbished medical equipment. All right, our buddy Rich Beem joins us. He's taken a little bit of a hiatus, Rich. We've been, hanging and banging. We had on Pete Jones, who took us on a trip down at Hollywood, talked a little bit about, Billy Walters and winning Project Greenlight for the first time. I'm just giving you a little bit of what's happened since you've been gone. We had on a guy who wrote a great book, John Miller, about Earl Weaver, the last manager. And we took it and discussed, indeed. Rich was at the Pittsburgh Pirates game last night and is a lover of baseball. But I don't know, Rich, you have any thoughts? Do you remember Earl Weaver from back in the 70s?
I do, but I don't. Yeah, I do, but I don't know. I don't remember anything really about him. To be fair, I don't know any stories about him. I don't know a whole lot of anything
about him.
Yeah, but I do know the name. I do know the name for sure.
Absolutely. All right, so walk us through, Rich, where we stand at Oakmont as far as weather, conditions, the preamble before we break down the field a little bit.
Yeah, right now it's in great shape. And if you watch social media, you're going to hear from everybody how brutal the rough is. I mean, that's just standard for Oakmont. I mean, not each and every week, outside the tournament, but every time the USGA, the US Open comes here, the rough is the first thing that everybody talks about. Then they talk about the green speeds, or maybe they talk about the green speeds beforehand, but they get tied up together. And so social media, you're going to see a lot of guys who are, how penalizing the rough is and the greens. The golf course is in perfect shape. It's still intimidating as hell. I don't know if there's a more intimidating golf course. I haven't played here, Andy, since 2007. And without looking it up, I know I shot a couple over the first day and was feeling pretty good about it, even though it finished bogey. But then I went out the next day and I think I was 6 over through 6 or something stupid. And then that was it. That was my turn and that was over. And I left there thinking, you know what? I'd pay good money to never have to play here ever again. And thankfully, nobody's invited me. So I haven't had to turn down that offer because I would show up and say, okay, what are the green fees? All right, here's your cash. I'm going to go to the bar and I'm just going to sit and wait for you guys. I'm not even going to go out there. No, thank you. I mean, when you have the club champion, who's a +1 out there, I think he was on the Golf Channel last night. He goes out there and says, yeah, normally, around here, I shoot 74, 75, which is 4 or 5 over. Although I think they might add, no, they don't add any more par 5s outside of this week. So I'm like, okay, that's 4 or 5 over par for a guy that's a +1. If you're scratch or even plus, you can play. There's absolutely no doubt you can play. But I just find this golf course to be just over the top intimidating. But what I did find today, so bizarrely, is I kind of found it to be a little bit softer off the tee, meaning that I think the fairways are a little bit wider than what I kind of remember them. But listen, if you miss the fairways, good luck to you. I mean, just full Liam Neeson, good luck. It's just, forget about it. I mean, it's just going to be, you're going to have a very long day and you're going to miss a lot of greens. I think Dustin Johnson hit 73% of the greens when he won here in 2016. That's otherworldly. You hit 73% of the greens and you, no matter how you putt, you're going to win. But it's just a golf course that is, it's hard. It's just absolutely not statistically hard, but it borderlines on being that way. It's just, it just, there's no let up. There's no let up whatsoever.
The last time you were on Taking to the Streets, Rich, you were talking about walking off the course at Quail Hollow and how savage it was just in a practice round. So what's the difference pragmatically between, because Oakmont gets all the credit of being the big beast and how brutal it is, and obviously the pedigree is totally different of Oakmont versus Quail Hollow. No disrespect to Quail Hollow, but they haven't hosted 10
Yeah.
This will be the 10th at Oakmont US Open. So you get the point. But
Yeah.
Hollow is a savage beast in its own right, correct?
So yeah, it is. It is. But here's the difference, I think, at least for a guy like me. Like when I look at Quail Hollow, and if I would have played there, I could understand how I would make pars and even a birdie or two out on that golf course. I would understand where it is that I'm going to be able to take advantage of it. And then here and there, I got to hit good shots. But I would have 3 par 5s and a short par 4 at Quail Hollow, and I could figure it out. I could probably figure something out, a way to kind of navigate around there and do it. I don't think I can do that here because there is no let up. If you find the fairway, that's half the equation. Now you got to figure out what you're going to do to find the green and keep it on the green. And at the pace that these things are running, and the firmness that they're going to try and get them at, especially the first 2 days when it's a little bit drier, Andy. They are expecting some rains this weekend, which should soften the golf course up. But I don't know if I could go around this golf course and come up with a way where that I can seriously think, oh, I can probably birdie, 2-3 holes out here. I don't see a single one of them. I mean, even 17, the easiest hole out there, you still have to hit a really good shot to find the fairway. And then you've got to conjure up a wedge, and you better hope it's in a good location for you to spin the golf ball. Because if not, and this is just for me. Now, these guys go out there, they can certainly hit it a lot further than I can, but even with the wider fairways, there's always going to be in danger. Like say I think there's a great example of it. The par 5 12th hole. It's straight, it's 632 yards long, right? But it's straight down the hill. You got big, straight, but a couple of bunkers. If you find the fairway, fantastic. You might have a chance to go for it in 2 if you're a longer player. However, there's a bunker about 40 yards just shy and just left of the green. If you just carry that, you might, if you hit the highest 3-wood you've ever hit in your life, you might be able to stop it on the green because everything goes straight down away from you on a green that's probably 45 yards deep. And it's just, you can't stop the golf ball. You can't slow it down. It's just one of these perplexing golf courses that, and I'm not saying that the guys that win here have career weeks, but they have career defining weeks when you win here at Oakmont. I just think that this is the ultimate test when it comes to patience and what's between the gray matter between your ears, because you're going to survive it. You're not going to excel at Oakmont. You're just hoping to survive. And it's just a hell of a test. I enjoy walking around the golf course with a yardage book. I enjoy watching what these guys are doing and can appreciate what they're trying to do, trying to figure this out. But listen, when things start going sideways for you, there's no pumping on the brakes. You can't. It's so hard to turn around a bad round.
And to that point, when I think of this tournament and what a beast it is, that matter between your ears, the quiet mind, all the things, the golf speak that this matters. Is there a validity when you think of Goosen winning this thing twice and Andy North winning it twice, that it's a type more than almost a golfer that wins this tournament because it is so intense? And those two guys were, them probably, obviously, personally, they're mellow dudes, I would assume, and they are not guys that get rattled, especially Retief. And, this is a personality test as much as it is a physical test.
Without a doubt. And that's what always makes the winner here so unique at any US Open, because, you have to have the mental fortitude, because you're going to get punched in the mouth, you're going to get kicked while you're down a little bit, but you got to be willing to get yourself off that mat and get back out there and do it again. But you have to forgive yourself, but also, you can't remember what you did. You have to forget about everything that happened just before then and carry on first thing or the very next shot. You can't let anything that happened in the past, in the last 5 minutes or even the last 2 hours, affect what you're going to do on this next shot. And that's the most ultimate test. That's a test every single week. There's nothing worse in the US Open, because once you lose that focus, all of a sudden you're going to make a double or a triple or worse. It'll be interesting to see what the scores are like over the first 2 days. I think there's going to be some guys that really struggle, and I think we might see some okay rounds, but I don't think we're going to see, I don't think we're going to see anybody finish under par at all this week. I just don't see that happening. I not unless it rains a bunch on this weekend and the wind never comes. But I just don't see that happening. This thing is just way too tough.
Well, I heard the longtime pro there, Bob Ford. Good. And Bob said, and this is a bit of a conundrum on the podcast that I listened to. Bob said, if it rains, they're going to shoot 5 under the winner. If it doesn't, they're going to shoot 5 over. And the forecast looks like it's going to be half rainy, half not. Does that mean that the winner's even?
Listen. I think that before I even saw this the other day, I kind of on a podcast or at least a glimpse of one. Somebody asked me, what do you think the winning score is going to be at Oakmont? Without seeing the golf course, without doing anything, just kind of hearing some rumblings of what's going on. I said, you know what? Give me 71. Give me 1 over par every day. And I guarantee I'll be picking up a big fat check, whether it's the $4.3 million or the $2.32 million. It doesn't matter. I'm going to pick up a massive check. I think if you shoot even par, you win. I think if you shoot 4 over, you're going to go into a playoff to win.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Let me give you before we get into our picks. When I was handicapping this event, I found this very, very difficult on a few different fronts. First off, just on a random thought, the POA greens. Okay, POA greens are tricky.
Yeah.
This is a weird layout because POA greens are normally indigenous to the West Coast, to Pebble Beach.
Well, no, not they're actually not. They're actually indigenous to a lot of different places. In fact, over in Scotland and Ireland, they're everywhere over there.
That's what I wanted to ask you about.
POA greens are actually on the East Coast. They're actually really good and they're really firm, just because you have the cooler temperatures. It doesn't get as wet and or rainier. Pebble Beach. What happens with those greens, and they've gotten a lot better over the last 2 years. I'm sure that they've gotten some different growing techniques because they've gotten remarkably better. But POA greens over here on this side of the country, they always seem to be a little on the firm side. They can keep them firmer for whatever reason, and they can dry them out easier. And I don't know how, and I don't know why, but the POA greens that they have, they're remarkable. You're not going to see the wobbling and bobbling that we used to. Now, granted, there used to be times, back in the 70s and 80s, where you would get some bumpy POA greens, especially in the afternoon. You're not going to see any more of that. They're going to be absolutely stellar the entire week that we're here. Whatever the USGA and all the agronomists around the world have found, they found a way to keep POA greens just absolutely in perfect shape.
Because in my brain, while I'm studying up on the POA greens, and I'm saying to myself, this can't be right. It's bent grass fairways, but it's POA greens. You're saying the two can exist. That's not an oxymoron. They both can exist on a golf course. That is Oakmont. Where I was thinking about it, Rich, was the POA greens as just a punter like me, as a guy that watches this from afar. I thought of who I thought of? I thought of Shea Reavie. I thought of a guy who was really relatively insignificant on tour, but he was dominant on POA at Pebble Beach. If you threw him in a tournament there, they got
sure.
And so it tripped me up because I was saying to myself, at Oakmont, is it the POA or is it the lightning fast, or is it really about lightning fast? Correct.
It's more about lightning fast, yeah. And you're right. And another name that was always kind of thrown out there was Kevin Sutherland. Kevin Sutherland was a guy that grew up in Sacramento. And he putted POA greens better than anybody I ever saw. And I asked him one time, I said, how do you do it? He goes, I just kind of take my chances and I try and dye everything in. I want this thing just falling in dead weight because I want to make that hole as big as I possibly can. And he says, I always putted POA greens very well because I was never an aggressive putter. And you look at Tiger Woods, he was an aggressive putter. He succeeded at Pebble Beach, but he never came close to winning at Riviera. And so it's kind of a weird dynamic where some POA greens make sense to guys. And to be fair, I would say that Pebble Beach's greens are probably easier to read, especially for a guy like Tiger who can read greens better than anybody else, because they're all tilted from back to front and it's pretty simple. Everything kind of goes right to right, right to left, left to right. There's no real, snaky type of putts out there. But yeah, I like where your head was at when you're going there with the greens, because I think that is important. I think it's always important.
And I'm always, as my listeners know, I'm someone who loves to fade the chalk and try to beat the favorite and that kind of guy. Just for the record, Scotty Scheffler, if you really do look at numbers, is atrocious putting on POA green. So let's just make that a full statement here, okay? Doesn't mean that I'd like to know where you fall on that, but he's not a dead fit for Oakmont. I'm sorry, people. He's not. He's not a dead fit for this course. So if putting matters, which I think it does, Scotty Scheffler, per the numbers, well over 100 rounds on POA, is bad.
Interesting.
Not average, but bad.
See, funny enough, though, I almost look at it because I've got access to inside the ropes, but I've seen him win twice at Bay Hill when the greens were as fast as I've ever seen anything in my life. As firm and fast I've seen anything. It's just like putting on glass. The ball doesn't roll; it skids for the first 4 or 5 feet. So I'm not fearful of his putting ability nearly as much. But now you say Poana, and listen, it's interesting because some guys don't like putting on Bermuda greens. Some guys don't like putting on better grass greens. Just because you don't quite get you don't see the lines as easily. I think that POA greens are some of the easiest putts, I think, to read as long as they're true, because there's always little blotches and little spots that you can aim at where you know you want the golf ball to either roll over or roll just inside of, however you putt. But I always wanted to kind of pick a spot out, and the way the Poana greens are, they're splotchy. They have a lot of dark and light spots all in them, and so I always felt like it's easier to pick a line on those. Now, granted, you're picking a line on greens that are running 13.5 to 14 on the step meter. That is a problem for a lot of folks. Guys like me, I always putted fearfully, especially on fast greens. I never had great success on super fast greens, but I kind of would rather have seen Poana greens than I would have Bermuda greens. Bermuda greens just never, I grew up on bent grass greens, and Bermuda greens always, they didn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Where does this course rank in the U.S. Open course offering? Pinehurst 2, Pebble Beach. Let's throw.
I think the number one
It has to be thrown in there in Chicago.
I think the number one. I think the number one U.S. Open course is Shinnecock. I think that Shinnecock is probably the ultimate test because it's exposed to the elements, being out there on Long Island. It's got more of an old school fescue type feel. It's a little bit of a links course, but not really, kind of more of a parkland golf course. And it asks everything, because you're never going to get a calm day there. So you got to battle some breezes. You got to battle tough conditions. You got to battle yourself. I think that Shinnecock is the ultimate test. I think this one, more than anything else, this is the hardest one mentally. This is the hardest one mentally by a long shot. And so I think that, again, I've never been a massive fan of Oakmont just because it beat me up so bad. There's seriously some scar tissue there. But I think as far as a true test goes, the USGA could cut the rough in half right now, and you're still going to see a winning score, probably even par. It's the golf course. It might almost get harder if you got golf balls that were jumping out of the rough, because guys think that they can control the golf ball when it's jumping, and it's going to go running right on the same bad lines you're going to find around the greens if they hit it in the rough. So I think that this one is probably for me the second one, and then I think Pebble Beach would be the third. I think those would be like if you had to play golf at this event at 3 golf courses for the rest of your days, I think this would be a hell of a rotation. Pebble Beach, Shinnecock, and here.
This episode of Taking It to the Streets is brought to you by Wrightwood Medical, the leader in used and refurbished medical equipment. Wrightwood specializes in ultrasound equipment, but can also be your vendor of choice when sourcing lower-cost alternatives for your operating room suites, scanning the entire medical spectrum. From single physician offices to larger hospitals, Wrightwood is the lower-cost solution for your everyday medical equipment needs, and all of Wrightwood's equipment comes with warranty. You can reach Wrightwood directly at www.wrightwoodmedical.com. That is with a W, WRIGHTWOOD medical, or 773-848-7100. Again, 773-848-7100. If it's used medical equipment, it's Wrightwood Medical.
Go ahead, Beemer. Take us down the road we're waiting for. You've been so hot on this show. keep it going. Give us.
I'm actually gonna back off a little bit. I'm not gonna pick. I'm gonna pick. My first pick is gonna be Harris English. And again, I'm going back to what these guys are gonna go through mentally more than anything else. I think Harris English would be a guy that has to do well here. I mean, he's so subdued. He's strong. He can hit the ball a long way. He can hit it high. He can hit it low. I think he's going to be an amazing pick. I'm going to throw a little bit of I had these guys marked down here. I guess I didn't. I'm going to throw a little wrinkle in there too. And again, this is all just by me. Look, Tom Hoagie. Not a lot is thought about Tom Hoagie. But Tom Hoagie finds a lot of fairways and he finds a lot of greens. His putting is good. It's not great. But Tom Hoagie's a guy like Tom Kite. He's just going to wear the golf course out. He's just going to sit there and just find fairways, find greens, and just wear it out. I think he's got a hell of an opportunity this week to go out there and showcase it. And I got to stick with Americans on this deal because that's just me. I'm going to go Sam Burns. Sam Burns is one of these guys, again, that's a really good putter. He's strong in every department. And I think that coming off that week last week that he had, losing in the playoff, I think that he's hungry for a win. And why not bounce back this week? So I'm not going to pick the usual suspects just because I think that, it's kind of a given. I think that Scotty Scheffler should have a great week. I'm actually a little worried about Rory's pairing. When Shane Lowry, Justin Rose, and McIlroy, I can understand why they pair them together just like I can Ben Griffin, Andrew Novak, and Maverick McNeely. And sometimes what the USG does, they have fun with these pairings. And what they've done with the Ben Griffin, Novak, and McNeely is those guys are all Americans on the cusp of making the Ryder Cup team. So obviously they want up and coffee comers. Absolutely. But the Lowry, Rose, and McIlroy pairing is a little interesting to me because I remember at the PGA when Rory, Scotty, and Xander were paired together. Sometimes he says, it's not that comfortable, not that easy, playing against, world, number 1 and 3 in the same group. Rory was talking about because he goes, listen, there's other people in the field that we have to beat too. We don't have to just beat these other two guys. But I think that the pairing with them almost might be too comfortable. And that might sound a little strange, but, normally when I'm playing with somebody, I got to have a motivation just to beat the guys in my group for whatever reason. Maybe they got the best of me last time. Maybe, we don't see quite eye to eye, whatever the case. But I always wanted a little motivation to beat these guys. And when you're playing with two close pals like that, sometimes you lose the motivation you get lost in what they're doing sometimes. I don't think it's a very good pairing for any three of those guys. I think that they would rather be paired with, other guys that maybe they haven't played a whole lot of golf with, but I don't think that pairing helps them out one bit. So I'd be a little leery of that grouping right there.
Of three of them, right, Beemer?
Yeah, exactly.
Your assessment there brings me back to one of a sportsism. Ken Norton and Joe Frazier never fought because they were friends. So
okay.
And it's the same exact reasoning that you just gave. Real hard to box somebody and want to knock somebody out, potentially put them in the hospital with a buddy of yours, a guy you like.
Yeah,
you're gonna wire them.
You gotta want to go out and just beat the dog snot out of guys. That's why Tiger was never really close with anybody on tour because he hated everybody equally. Yeah. And it's one of those things that he doesn't hate everybody, but he didn't have any real motivation to sit there, and he never talked to anybody. And if he did, there was a few words here or there, like, can you move that?
How about everybody? How about O'Meara?
Started off really good friends, but then I think they kind of started separating a little bit.
About Noda,
but they were also a different. They were a different age group. He and Noda, college roommates. That was probably the closest guy to them, to him. Tiger just had everything else going on. When he got done with the golf tournament, he just disappeared. He left for the day. That's just how he operated. But I think with those three guys, paired together, sometimes I can get a little too cozy, a little too obnoxious more. And you know, and I feel bad that the USGA did that because I think that Rory would rather play with, I don't know, say Patrick Cantlay and Lucas Glover. Neiman, anybody. Yeah, Neiman. Why not put him with Joaquin Neiman, you know? I think that it's I understand why they did.
Rich, why not pair them against live guys? Let's just say the words. Why not pair them against their mortal enemy, which are hip guys?
I agree. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt. You know, to be fair, I haven't looked at the tee times all that closely because I was sitting there. I'm thinking more about the golf course and some of the shots that some of these guys have to hit, and the fact that the first hole, if you don't hit it 285 yards off the tee box, you can't see the green.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
If you don't hit it 285 yards off the tee box, you cannot see the green. Oh, it's too funny.
That's incredible.
Like going.
All right, so folks, so let me give the rhyme to my reason. We'll conclude this. I'll give my 3 head-on picks. These are head-on picks. Rich gave you the guys that he likes overall in the tournament.
Yeah.
For his reasons. A lot of this doesn't really make sense even to me, yet these are my notes and this is the way I went. So just go with it or don't. Take it for what it's worth. I pointed, in my homework, I would look for what I felt in my brain were going to be like rounds to what they would get at Oakmont. What does that mean in English? I'm looking for scoring relative to par difficult. I'm looking for hitting the fairways difficult. I'm looking for long rough. I'm looking for lightning green speed. I'm looking for course length, 7,400. And I'm looking for calm winds. Because remember, that's going to be the game plan to get you to the cup. At least in my rhyme to my reason. That's what it's going to be. Came up with 2 rounds. Again, insane because a sample size of 1, I can't even believe I'm saying this. It's so dumb. But yet, if you're following me, the first round at Arnold Palmer at Bay Hill made all of the issues that I just gave you, except for it was windy. That was round 1 at Bay Hill, this last Bay Hill, okay? I tossed it out. We're not going to waste any more time with it. It took me about 5 hours from the time I originally wrote this up to walk the dog, had dinner, and said, you know what? It's not a comp because it was windy that day. Throw it out. Here we go. Round 2 at the Memorial this year. I'm not going back to the dark ages to 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 2 years ago. I'm going back to something that happened similar to those conditions in the recent past in an elevated game. I'm going to name these names off quickly. Here we go. These are guys that performed extremely well under very difficult circumstances. The second round at Memorial. Nick Taylor, Russell Henley, Jordan Spieth, Tom Hoagie, Sam Burns, Akshay Bhatia, Ryan Gerard, Xander Schauffele, Justin Thomas, Davis Thompson, Max Grazerman, Minwoo Lee. Not going to repeat it. You can rewind. Where do we go from here? You just named about 13, 14 guys. This is where the POA came in for me. I want in my head on a guy that I can trust on POA greens versus a guy I can't trust on POA greens. That to me is where the rubber meets the road at Oakmont. With that said, I'm going to go with Akshay Bhatia minus 120 against Patrick Reed. Do your homework. You'll see Akshay actually likes putting on POA. Nick Taylor, minus 110 against Thomas Detry. I think we saw the best of Detry last week at the Canadian. I never liked, that's where I'm going to disagree with Rich on Sam Burns. I think back-to-back winners, and yes, he went to a playoff last week and lost in the playoff, but back-to-back winners in the PGA is a UFO sighting. They don't occur. There's no such thing as a back-to-back winner. You can do the needle in the haystack with me and send me all your replies and talk about how there is a back-to-back winner. Rich is a back-to-back winner. You're a UFO. You're a UFO.
I won the international. Now, granted, I took a week off in between, but I won back-to-back starts, which that's a UFO sighting.
There's no such thing as a back-to-back winner. You know what I mean. If you really, that it's impossible to win back-to-back.
It's only reserved for some of the greats in the game. Now, Sam didn't win last week. He lost to the playoff. So the reason why I look at Sam is because he putts he puts tough greens awfully well. He has his pace control is pretty darn good. And if he runs it by, he's very confident on putts inside of 5 feet. Now, again, I also believe too, though, that form coming off form and losing in that and losing the way that he did, I think that he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder and he knows he's playing well. He thinks that he should have won last week, although Ryan Fox just outclassed him on the 4th or 5th playoff hole. And, that's just the way it goes. You're not going to, you can't win. It's hard winning. But I think that he's one of these guys where he can run off a couple of really streaky hot finishes. I like Sam.
I understand. Before I ask you another question, my last pick will be Minwoo Lee plus 110 over Taylor Pendrith. So my picks again, Akshay Bhatia minus 20 over Patrick Reed, Nick Taylor minus 10 over Detry, Minwoo Lee plus 10 over Pendrith. Let me ask you something. Is it crazy, the argument I made, because the sample size is only 1 round, or is there validity that they faced the living hell at the Memorial? And if you really did the homework and you saw, and they're going to get that at Oakmont. I have the numbers.
So here's the thing about it, is that Cam, we ran into, we were walking around the golf course today, Laura Davies, Nick Doherty, and myself. We ran by Cam Davis, big, tall, lanky Australian kid. And he was hitting some chips out on the second green. And just kind of asked him, hey, is it really that tough? He goes, because this is not really much tougher than what we saw 2 weeks ago or whatever it was 3 weeks ago at Jack's place. He goes, it might be a fraction longer, but it's basically the same. It's just deep, and sometimes the ball can go all the way to the bottom and sometimes it stays kind of halfway in between because it's so lush around Oakmont. So when I heard that, that's where, that's when you got to start thinking about, who can win it the Memorial Tournament? Because there's a lot of similarities with fairways Cambrian one way or the other. The only difference is you can run the golf ball into almost every single green here, with the exception of I think like 3 of them. But there are definitely a lot of similarities. Big sloping greens that have a lot of pace on them. That's Memorial. That's Muirfield Village. That's Oakmont. Some of the thickest scruff you're going to find from tee to green here and Muirfield Village. I can see that. I can understand why you would look at Muirfield Village as a sample size, because that is probably the course on tour that's going to play most like this week at Oakmont. And again, there you're going to have it. Like you're going to say, well, Scotty Scheffler won that Muirfield Village. Why not here? Listen, folks, he's got all the. I'm not going to bet against him. I'm just kind of looking at some different names outside the book. There's another guy that I almost wanted to pick, but his form isn't there, and it's just killing. It's Patrick Cantlay. Patrick Cantlay should love this place. You should love it.
I was always such a big fan of his, and here comes the but. The but is the minute he wanted to be paid for his wearing a hat or whatever, and look, Rich, his career hasn't exactly been a Jack Nicklaus out there. He figures out ways to lose a lot more times than he figures out ways to win. And again, wanting to be paid for the hat.
Yeah,
that thing that was in the Ryder Cup was really a bad look for a guy that's not exactly murdering it. He makes a ton of money, don't get me wrong. But as far as waving trophies over his head, which he doesn't.
Yeah, that whole thing, again, I don't know where it stemmed from. I mean, there's so many small backstories to it all. And to be fair, I don't care to know them all. I am in your corner on that. I don't necessarily like the fact that these guys are getting paid, but I also have heard some rumblings what these guys are getting for President's Cup too, and the amount of money that these guys, I know that they generate a ton of money, but listen, you had to have banked a bunch of money if you're going to be at a Ryder Cup anyways, and the amount of swag and the details and what they give these guys at the Ryder Cup, it's mind blowing. So
Rich, they're not public defenders. I'm the west side of Chicago.
No, I'm just kind of like, I just don't quite get it. Why, if they love this game so much, why don't they just tell the PGA, listen, you have to direct this money that we're making back into the local programs of where we're at. You've got to put money into certain areas. Don't give it to me. What we need to see you guys pumping it into certain areas, certain arenas, junior golf, access to golf courses, reducing the greens fees for some kids to get out there. There's a great a group of individuals out in California, and I'm sick to my stomach. I can't remember the name of it, but basically it's just a bunch of wealthy individuals that generate a bunch of money, and they subsidize kids golf. They say like all the greens fees for a year, they pay greens fees. All the kid has to do is pay $5. $5 to play public golf courses in and around it, and it's everywhere in the U.S., not just California, where these guys are most located. And I'm drawing a blank on the name, but we need to fund that. We need these kids out here. So I think that the money going into the players' coffers, or even going through their foundation, I think all of that's fine and dandy to a point, but I think that they need to just, hey, listen, where did we grow up? I mean, I grew up in public golf courses all the time. I was never a member of a country club until later on in life. And I'm just like, I don't know. That part of it bothers me, just because these guys are, they're incredibly wealthy, but yeah. And so I don't understand why we need to give them another $500,000 just to go play the Ryder Cup. I mean, the parts of that just don't feel very good at it.
No. And, you make me think. It's sort of different podcast, but I think about Eastlake. And I guess Eastlake was supposed to be the test bed to let lesser fortune children get a taste of the game from tee to green to actually playing. But I think they charge for greens fees at Eastlake. I don't think someone who's an African American.
Well, they built Eastlake is still privately owned, but there's a golf course right next door to it that they have access to. There's a couple of other spaces there at Eastlake, and to be fair, I don't know all of them. I should at this moment in time, but I don't. But there are a couple of places that they do have access to right next door to Eastlake. There's another golf course. I've hit golf balls out there, and so they have access to that. They don't have access to Eastlake itself, because that's basically a golf course that is owned by a corporation. I think you have to be either CEO, or the corporation that you are CEO owns part of it. I think it's more CEO driven than it is actually individuals.
Right.
From what I've come to understand.
How does that help the community of Eastlake?
They've dumped a lot of money into that area. They've put a lot of money into the surrounding area of Eastlake
and the beautification of it.
And the Bobby Jones there's also another facility, Bobby Jones Golf Course, which is about 15, 20 miles away. They redid the whole golf course, driving range, everything. They've made a hell of a place over there too. So they have done quite a bit for junior golf in Atlanta through the Eastlake Foundation. And, again, they're putting money back where the kids should be. Again, some of the stuff that we need to help subsidize, and he says, make equipment a little bit more, if they're going to get $500,000 from the PGA, go to your equipment manufacturer. Hey, listen, I want to give you guys $500,000. I want you guys to supply these to kids all around the country. You find programs, or I can help you find programs, but just, give these guys, these kids a fighting chance, and bring more to the game. There's got to be a better way of doing it.
The biggest problem with the game, if I have one answer, and at the pro level as well as at the amateur level, is speed of play.
That's a different kind.
I understand.
We're going to talk about another.
I understand. It's too long of a topic. We could both drive each other crazy. I guess I'd only say why not have a shot clock?
Listen, there's a ton of ways to do it, but we could come up with all kinds of ideas. It's a part of it has to do with the simple fact that if you look at this golf course, they've stressed it out to the max this week. Not going to get any easier. It's as hard as it gets. So you can't speed up anybody to the U.S. Open. So
give me your winner before we go, Rich. Give me who wins it on Sunday. You don't have to. In your heart, who wins it?
I think Harris English wins it.
Wow. First guy in my brain was Akshay. I'm going to go with Akshay.
All right. Sounds good.
Folks, we'll see you next week on Taking It to the Streets. Beemer, great seeing you.
You got it, buddy. Thanks.
Goodbye from St. Pete. And remember, folks, you're only as good as your last trade. So never too high, never too low, till we meet again.